Yeah, I'm Nick Shelley. I work at Trellix, and today I'm going to talk to you about kind of upscaling your security operations with Gen AI. So this should be fun. It kind of ties to a lot of the topics Ron was talking about in the opening, which I assume is going to be relevant for just about everybody on the call. Whenever we talk to stakeholders at our customers, AI is always a concern. And we'll talk about it from both sides, just like kind of Ron introduced in the beginning. So that's pretty cool. Thank you for that. So I'm Nick Shelley. That's one of the best pictures I have of myself. So hopefully I represent myself okay on the screen. I'm a solution architect, and I think what makes me uniquely qualified to give a talk like this is that not only did I start in IT and security in '92 in the Air Force, that's 32 years ago, which I can't believe, but I got out of the Air Force in '99 and had an IT career, IT and cybersecurity before we called it that. Uh, in like the dot-com era and through corporate life. And then I became a software vendor in 2006, working for various cybersecurity companies. So now I've seen it from both sides, and I can understand that probably the most important thing that we can convey to you today, and that you should ask all your software vendors to convey, is what value that they're bringing to you with the solutions that they're selling. Because to me, that's the most important thing. As a customer buying solutions, I was always inundated with a lot of people trying to sell me stuff. But most important thing I wanted to know was that it was relevant, it solved problems for me, and had a really good business outcome. And that's what I'm going to try to convey to you today. Okay, so Trellix, as Ron mentioned, we're actually an old company, but we believe in this whole idea of powering a resilient and thriving world and living security everywhere. And what that really means is the idea that we want to transform security operations to, again, meet some of those important things like does it provide value? Is it going with you where it needs to go? Can it respond to things that happen as they develop? And in the introduction, Ron had talked about, the bad guys are actually innovating. So we need to be able to innovate too while they continue to do that. So who is Trellix? You can see here in the center of the screen, we were founded in 2002. Uh, but the legacy and heritage goes all the way back to 1987, which is actually when I graduated high school. But you can see Trellix and FireEye are part of the assets, or sorry, McAfee and Fire are part of the assets of Trellix, as also uh, sky high security. So, along the idea that cloud security is one of the more important things that we have to be concerning ourselves with. And within that timeline, we see lots of innovations. One that we'll kind of touch on a little bit later is, the impossible travel one in the bottom left corner. That was kind of innovated in a time where we were starting to look at logs and analyzing them and starting to realize, like, hey, this guy can't log in from the US and Europe 5 minutes later. That doesn't make sense. That's something that you should go investigate. And so we've continued that evolution all the way into things like AI-driven automated investigations, which we're now doing today. So what is the kind of the lens that we have been putting on things for the last 8 or 10 years? So this is not just us, this is all cybersecurity vendors, but what we realized is that as the cloud has emerged, as we move into things like AWS and other SaaS services that we depend on, it's been most important to understand, to solve security, you need to be able to understand big data. And that was a resounding message across really all verticals. And essentially what they were saying is that I'm allowing my users and my services to touch a lot of things. Uh, is there a way to analyze that in a way that will give us a security outcome that we want? And so what we did, and this is kind of the modern approach of what we did, which is we said, look at all these data sources in the bottom left. It could be your cloud services, it could be AWS, it could be all the data you have around data usage of files and login attempts and all kinds of stuff. We're going to take all that data, we're going to put it into Amazon S3. We're going to use the Amazon big data models and machine learning models to find anomalies. And so that's kind of that impossible travel thing I was just talking about. And then we're going to give those anomalies to the human analyst. And we're going to say, okay, these are the things that we found that we think are important. let's go search and dig deeper and investigate that. Well, that was okay. That was the best we could do at the time, and I think it served really well for the era of what we were trying to do. And so, what worked? Ingesting the data worked, analyzing and matching worked, and searching through huge data volumes that worked. And so we liked that. But what it didn't do is it didn't really tell us what we didn't know, right? So what are some of the meaningful things we could find if we could really dig into the data a little bit deeper? So here's an example of that. So if we look at a week's timeline of abnormal activity that we identify, it could be any number of things. We've given some examples here of unusual AMI usage, directory logins that don't make sense, people using infrastructure commands or other applications in ways that don't make sense. Well, those things are all anomalous things, but they don't necessarily show as being tied together. So, what we could do is we could study the root cause of all those security incidents. We could try to figure out, is there a way we could have caught it? But what really is the message here, I think this graphic that our author put in here was great. It says, there's a guy here saying, you're drowning, and here's the guy drowning, and it says, that's not helpful, right? And so that's kind of what we've all been facing with this big data model, because things can happen that are indeed security incidents, but they might not match something that we would typify as normal. So the analytics weren't wrong, they just weren't as helpful as we wanted them to be. Okay, so how do we now kind of move that into the future toward the right side of the timeline that says we're in the current world of generative AI, so how can we go a little deeper and detect anomalies and get the focus we need? That's with tools like Gen AI. So if we look at that old model that we had and we sliver in this Amazon Bedrock box here, what we can now see is that all the same data sources exist, probably more, right? Because we just keep growing. We can put that into the big data model, we can distill it down, and we can get some anomalies. But now we can ask AI, what can we do about it? Like, what else is going on here that we can infer from these data sets that we found? So here's how Gen AI makes that useful. So we have these initial findings to investigate, but now we can use more queries, prompt engineering or pre-built investigations for Gen AI to ask deeper questions about that stuff. So this is kind of the key statement to the whole thing. So when we look at this from this inverted pyramid point of view, a large organization, as they typically would have potentially billions or even a trillion events. We've put that into a big data engine like Amazon EMR. And then we distill down and get these 1,000 anomalies. Then we give that to Amazon Bedrock, and we say, okay, let's ask a bunch of questions here to determine in an automated way what's even more important and how those things all fit together. Then we get 10 really good high fidelity alerts. So we can really give very, very good data to the analysts to understand, like, okay, this is what's important right now. So let's put that into a real world situation. So what does the real world situation look like? This is probably most organizations, by the way, on the left. So you have set up a trap in your SIEM or something like that that basically says, hey, I've got a telltale sign that account's compromised based on the fact that there was a password reset followed by a login from a different country. So that's pretty normal. It's something you would see as an output from a hacker. Now this hacker potentially has access to the corporate network at the privilege level of the person that they hacked. That's bad, right? Obviously, that's bad. But here's what happens in reality on the right side of the screen is that you have people traveling all the time, especially executives who have executive assistants that are asking them to do all kinds of weird stuff. And this happens over and over and over and over and over again. And it's the same setup. The user's traveling, so they're in a different physical location. They've forgotten their password, so they initiate a password reset. Now they're logged in from a foreign country. So in the left model, that looks bad, right? And there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening correlated to it that the executive assistant is doing to help that person. This happens all the time in large organizations. So if you think about the efficiency of what's happening with the with the security operations center and the help desk, they're being overwhelmed by extra things that they shouldn't have to deal with, but they have to deal with them because they look anomalous, right? So let's look at that from a Gen AI point of view. So all of the empty circles represent all the various billions of events that happen in large organization. But now we've been able to identify through the distillation of all the events, we have these 5 events. So what are these 5 events? Number one is the user traveling. Well, it's going to take us a few minutes to figure that out. Were there failed attempts before the password reset? We'll probably need a minute or two to figure that out. Do they have an EA? Yep, of course they do. That's going to take us a minute to find out. Does the level of access that the user that's been compromised have, is it high or low or medium? That helps determine the risk. Of course, that's going to take us a few minutes to find out. And after the password reset, what did they do? Do we need to do some cleanup or whatever? We don't know. So everything that's in blue is the human time it would take to investigate that, and understanding that this just example would happen several times a day for any large organization. But Gen AI could perform that 13 minutes of work in under 45 seconds. So that's kind of a cool kind of time saver, right? So let's look at that in a little more detail. So based on the information, we knew there was a suspicious IP, and that warranted raising the alert level, right? So this would be what the Gen AI is thinking while this is going on. The similar indicates a brute force attack correlated with successful logins. Okay, that by itself is a serious event. So Gen AI is going to mark that as serious. That IP triggered other rules, and especially in our IPS. And that indicates even more and more stuff that's kind of correlated to this thing. So Gen AI is starting to build a good picture here. The IP has generated lots of logs on other systems as well. And that's more broadly suspicious activity that needs to be added to the serious nature of what Gen AI is actually learning here. So here's the answer from Gen AI, this final paragraph that says, given the brute force attack, this is actually something we see as being high severity. So Mr. Customer, here's all the supporting evidence you need to investigate this and make sure that if this is an actual attacker, that you have all the information you need to take care of that. Now, if you think about that in reverse, so more of a positive viewpoint of that. So all the things that happen, if you think back to the slide that I had with the circles and all the noise that happens, one of the things that we hear most from customers is that, man, we have too much to look at. We can't look at it all. We're getting log fatigue. We have way too much work to do and not enough time to do it. Now the AI is actually doing all that work for you. So in the previous example, AI gave us an output and said, hey, although this happens all the time, we can determine through all of the Gen AI data that we've analyzed and the questions we asked, the Gen AI is saying, you need to go take a look at this because this is absolutely a security alert that should be at its highest level. Now, if you do that dozens, hundreds, thousands of times per day, it doesn't matter who you are, it's going to save you time. And in a typical large organization, the most staggering number I can give you is that in this example, the Trellix AI is performing the work of 45 people. And if that's, I mean, remember at the very beginning, I said, the thing I was looking for when I was a customer is how does my vendor provide me value? If I can save hiring 45 people to be as effective as I can with the 5 or 6 people, or maybe less than I currently have, wow, that's a game changer for me. And I think that's an important outcome. So let's look at that just from another point of view. So imagine that you're the guy on the left, and then all these people in gray is your AI engine doing all the work for you. Literally, to do the work of all these people, Bedrock's performing 357,000 seconds of analyst time per day, which is the equivalent of a 12 8-hour shift. So it's pretty remarkable how efficient adding a Gen AI tool could be to your organization. So let's compare and contrast that. So before we had the business issue of analysts overwhelmed by alerts. Now because we're giving all the alerts to Gen AI to deal with, uh, the analyst can focus on only the top percentage without any penalty whatsoever because we're getting all the data and we're getting all the data analyzed and presented to the customer as it needs to be. Wasting time by turning tools down because they're too noisy. With Gen AI, you don't have to do that. You can turn them all up. And so you're getting more and more data than you can possibly imagine that you can analyze. Only investigates alerts that are clear and obvious. Well, that's the way it used to be because we didn't have time to investigate every single alert, right? So now the Gen AI can investigate every single alert, and we can use automated playbooks to close alerts that are meaningful but are easy to solve, or we can raise them up into a high alert status that requires a human to intervene. Reduce alert aperture to known bad. Same thing. If you have too much data and you only say, I only want to look at the things that I know are bad, that means you're not seeing the things that you don't know are bad. So once you have the system kind of all plugged in and showing all the logs, you're able to now focus on more important things like innovation and threat hunting. And then the last thing here, ignoring most alerts, which is what you have to do when you have a small staff and 1 trillion alerts. Now we don't have to ignore any of them, right? Because the AI is taking care of it. And kind of to go back to Ron's initial comments, this is my final slide, by the way. When we look at the timeline of how attackers have grown and how we've had to defend against it, you can see 2005. That's when antivirus was basically like, they're trying to take advantage of vulnerabilities and use malware to do certain things. And we used machine learning back then to look for things that are like variants and things like that. So everybody remembers those days if you've been in it as long as I have. And then that kind of moved more to the online world where now we're looking at phishing. So we needed to move ML to the email stack. And then the emergence of the dark web and the dark web market, we needed to be able to say, within the framework of the on-prem infrastructure, let's look at all the events of all the machines that were in there, including some of the cloud services, and we would be able to determine, hey, we're starting to see attackers exfil data for the purpose of selling it. And now we're kind of in that whole new mode where we have the attackers are using Gen AI to attack us. So if they're going to overload us with things that look like something a human did, a regular human, we need to be able to detect that too, right? So that's where going along in the same notion of having a Gen AI tool to help distill down investigations, that's critically important from our point of view. And it proves, again, the value statement for the customer. Okay, so that kind of covers what I had to talk about, and I wanted to share with you. There are a lot of resources. I only touched on a tiny example. I was going to suggest to Ron that we do a history of the attacker, and what we see in the market is just all the threat actors that are out there trying to get your stuff. We have the data for all that, but with respect to this talk, we have tons of information around how our AI works. It's on Trellix.com, and we also have everything on the AWS Marketplace, which is QR code will take you there. And we have tons of webinars with examples on YouTube if you do use the search term Trellix plus AI. And that's it for my presentation. I wanted to give our author, Martin Holste, who's our regular speaker for this kind of stuff. He's CTO of Cloud and AI. You can catch him on LinkedIn there. I would highly advise connecting with him. And then this is my LinkedIn here. But Ron, that's all I have for right now. Do we have any questions?